News correspondent Terry Okita has the story in this special report for Eyewitness News.
As international calls for a ceasefire get louder, the fighting just gets bloodier. 13 Israeli soldiers were killed at the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank, the Army's deadliest setback in 18 months of conflict. Israeli officials say the troops were victims of a calculated ambush by Palestinians. It was a hard day, Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said. A very hard battle is going on there. According to observers, Israeli forces have now pushed several hundred Palestinians into a small section of the camp. The gunmen vowing to die rather than surrender. Meanwhile, in Nablus, Israel took control of the city's downtown area after days of fighting there. Israel says so far it has detained 1,600 Palestinians and has seized stockpiles of weapons. And even though the Israeli military has pulled out of 2 West Bank towns, it still failed to comply with U.S. demands for a complete withdrawal.
Well, these are all tactical maneuvers by the Israeli occupation army to give the impression that it is in compliance with the will of the U.S. and the international community.
After meeting with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak, Secretary of State Colin Powell urged Arabs to do their part in maintaining peace if a ceasefire is reached.
Hopefully, the Palestinian people will realize it is in their interest now to do everything they can to control their passions, to control the violence, to bring it down so that we can get a political process moving.
For the first time, Secretary Powell said he will be meeting with Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, as well as Prime Minister Sharon, during his visit to Israel later this week. Powell also said the U.S. will help monitor a potential ceasefire, giving both sides another incentive to end the bloodshed. In Washington, Terry Okita, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
Tension in this part of the world, even violence, has been a part of life there since the 1960s, and it is difficult to understand for some why peace is still elusive. Central Connecticut State University is hosting a number of seminars to get a better understanding of the conflict. Channel 3's Lou Martinez attended one of them. He's here now with more. Lou.
Well, Secretary of State Colin Powell is in the region trying to attain peace. Experts on this sensitive subject are trying to help people understand why it's happening. CCSU is playing host to a number of scholars who have studied this issue and have a good grasp on the conflict.
13 Israeli soldiers were ambushed this morning.
Ibrahim Abu Rabi is very familiar with the city where the ambush took place. He grew up only 30 minutes away in the Palestinian town of Nazareth. A professor of Islamic studies and Christian and Muslim relations at Hartford Seminary, Abu Rabi says the region can't afford any more bloodshed. He believes Palestinians and Jews can coexist.
My suggestion is for the Israeli army to pull out completely of the West Bank, Gaza, for Palestinians and the Israelis to make peace. That's the only way.
Israeli troops have pulled out of 2 Palestinian towns, but they remain in 4 other towns, including Jenin, where 13 soldiers were killed and several others wounded. Abu Rabi would like to see both Israel and Palestine have full diplomatic and economic relations in the future. CCSU professor of history Norton Mezvinsky, an author and expert on the topic, also believes peace can be achieved.
There will be enough people on both sides, majorities on both sides, that finally decide that they don't want to have their children killed anymore in wars or in fighting that erupts. So I think there will be peace, and I'm optimistic enough to think there will be peace in my lifetime.
CCSU will continue its lectures on peace issues through the end of the week. This Friday, some peace groups plan to rally outside of the Hartford Federal Building to ask President Bush to get more involved and help put an end to this Middle East conflict. Dennis?
In fact, we noticed a couple demonstrators there tonight. Channel 3's Lou Martinez. In the meantime, Jews around the world today took time to remember the victims of the Holocaust. In Hartford, just a few hours ago, the Charter Oak Cultural Center marked the day with a slideshow and lecture. Called Yom HaShoah, the day is set aside to unite Jews in honoring the 6 million Jews killed by Nazis during World War II. The Middle East was on the mind of President Bush as he visited Bridgeport and Greenwich today. Mr. Bush talked at length about Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi leader's threat to organize an oil boycott.
You know my opinion about Saddam. The world's not going to follow him. But it just goes to show how important it is to diversify our supply away from places like Iraq.
The president made those remarks at a fundraiser at the Greenwich Hyatt that netted nearly $750,000 for Connecticut Republicans. Among those with the president in his father's boyhood home, Governor Rowland, Congressman Chris Shays, Rob Simmons, and Congresswoman Nancy Johnson. Now, earlier in the day, Mr. Bush visited Bridgeport and encouraged people there to get into volunteering. There are new developments tonight in the Enron investigation. The former chief auditor for Arthur Andersen pleaded guilty to ordering the shredding of Enron documents. David Duncan handled the Enron account for Andersen and was fired by the company in January. Under this plea agreement, Duncan will cooperate with prosecutors who are now pursuing charges against the accounting giant. Closer to home, a failed deal with Enron has cost the president of Connecticut's trash authority his job. Richard Wright has agreed to step down as head of the CRRA. It was Wright who negotiated the deal which cost the authority $220 million when Enron declared bankruptcy. So far, there's no word on who will run the trash authority.
The board and myself are very concerned that there is, in fact, no chairman, and there could, in fact, be no president. And that could have possible problems in terms of some actions that might be required over at CRRA.
Wright will receive $76,000 and a half a year of medical coverage under the severance agreement. In Waterbury, it's a day that one truck driver soon won't forget. He crashed his tractor-trailer into a guardrail on the ramp between Route 8 and Interstate 84. The truck was left dangling 40 feet above the Naugatuck River, spilling some of its cargo into the water. The road has since reopened. The driver suffered only minor injuries. Every year, thousands of women are raped, and tonight, dozens gathered in New Britain to make everyone aware of that fact. The annual Take Back the Night March was held on the campus of Central Connecticut State University in New Britain. It was followed by a rally, a storytelling, and a candlelight vigil.
Yellow ribbon just means that we're counselors and we're here for people to talk to. The yellow is kind of a silent protest against sexual assault.
And tomorrow, rape survivors will speak on campus. 6 jurors have now been chosen for the murder trial of Kennedy cousin Michael Skakel. The latest selection is a woman who actually has a connection to the victim's family. The juror says her friend's mother is acquainted with Dorothy Moxley. The mother of the young girl Skakel is accused of murdering. The fate of a lawyer from Ledyard accused in an elaborate murder-for-hire scheme is now in the hands of the jury. Closing arguments in the Beth Carpenter trial today focused on the reliability of the state's star witness, Carpenter's former lover and law associate. Carpenter is accused of asking him to hire a hitman to kill her brother-in-law. The jury deliberated for several hours today without reaching a verdict. If convicted, Carpenter faces life in prison. New at 11 tonight, the Boston priest who advocated sex between men and boys admitted his pedophilia nearly 10 years ago right here in Hartford. The Boston Globe reports Father Paul Shanley was treated at the Institute of Living in 1993 after allegations he was a child molester. The Globe says during treatment, Shanley admitted to 9 sexual encounters, 4 of them with boys. Shanley is accused of molesting several children, running a gay motel in California, and attending a meeting of NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association.